When I decided to move into Hearthstone, I had found that the neighbors where I was living over in Edgewater were pleasant, but we didn't have any real connection, and I was looking for more connection.
I had studied about co-housing in my graduate training, and I thought, oh, this sounds kind of cool. Let's check it out. And Pablo thought, no way, that's weird. And then
that was my reaction. And then we went to one of the meetings, because the Hearthstone didn't exist yet. It was just the concept, but there were some plans that had already been drawn up. And we went to one meeting, and then I was all gung-ho and wanted to say, let's do this.
It makes it so much easier to get to know people and to make friends, because they're all just right there, and you kind of have to. You've suddenly acquired an extended family, and you have to get to know them. The first meeting was very interesting. I was excited.
Harriet and I were the only people who started out at that meeting that kept up. And it was a big meeting. There probably were 50 or so people. I remember I got so souped up that I couldn't hardly even sleep that night because I knew about co-housing, but I don't know, it just was so appealing to me. And I kept thinking, how are you going to sleep the rest of the 3 years?
It was pretty amazing to watch the community go from something on paper to a three-dimensional community.
There was a design seminar to design the layout of the land where we were going to put the common house and where we were going to put the buildings. And then later, there were design meetings to talk through the common house. And that was probably several meetings, and led by the architects, and the design meetings to lay out the buildings.
We had a team where there were representatives from each type of unit to be constructed. There were individual problems that did occur that were unique to each particular unit. It was a good thing that people who were eventually going to move into each configuration be represented.
Folded into that was also some of the community discussions, and that was led by Sherry.
Yes, yeah.
And Sherry was asking us to come up with vision statements and to deal with how we were going to learn about and practice the consensus models that are in effect in the co-housing project. So these, for many of us, that was new territory, new ground.
We thought in the beginning that we needed to flesh out every kind of, we needed to think of almost any type of situation and write some sort of policy about it so that we would know what territory we were in as we tried to live together. And luckily we found, I think eventually, that we didn't need all of that, but we kind of went through and considered every aspect of life, from pets and gun ownership to children and common meals. And, you know, when we tried to think of any kind of scenario that we might need guidance on.
Initially, I kind of made the assumption that everyone was going to get along because we were all like-minded. And then I realized, oh, first of all, we're not all like-minded, and not everybody will get along.
When it comes to people who intentionally want to live together, not everybody may be of the same mindset when it comes to raising children or politically or other aspects of life. But what is there and what kind of makes it work is the intention to get along and to kind of resolve any conflicts that arise.
Perhaps I was a little naive, that it would be kind of like when I went to my first day in college and my college dormitory, and everybody just bonded right out of the gate because we were all 18-year-olders, first time out of the house, and that's just what happens in college. And when you're older than that and you got your own life, your own friends, that it gets a little more complicated than that.
you think it's going to be a certain way. You kind of think, I'm going to live in a community, and this is how communities probably are, and we're going to. And I thought, in my version, I thought we're all going to explore life together. We're going to explore, interpersonal relationship, and we're going to dissect things and, just dial into how all that works, right? And it wasn't very long before I found out most people don't actually want to do that, right? And I had some hurt feelings for a while because I thought, oh my gosh, this isn't what I signed up for, right?
There was the early culling of people here who had worked real hard and signed up and then lived here for a while and realized that it just really wasn't their cup of tea. So there was a whole lot of shifting around in the early years.
This is a unique environment, and some people have to learn a different way of dealing with the world. And some people just want it to be more private.
And so I think a person moves into community, you think it's going to be a certain way, you find out it's not what you signed up for, and you get a little bit of maybe hurt feelings or a little anger or whatever, and you kind of sneak back into your own little space for a while. And then you need to borrow something, and there's a party, and somebody's made some interesting cocktails or whatever it is, and you start hanging out, and then you realize, this place is pretty great as it is, and it didn't need my version of itself to be interesting.
Co-housing is organized to have several ways to build community. One is the architecture, where you face each other on front porches and you get things in the common house and you have common meals and so on. The other way that it's structured is to have things you do together that build community. One is common meals, where we cook together and eat together, and another one is work days.
Work days are really good because they get people learning to work with each other and to work with somebody they haven't worked with before. And then we get lots of stuff done. We take care of the landscaping, and it looks so good after we've finished.
I think someone was just reminding me how I did not know how to cook before I came here. And so I could make rice and beans and pasta, those. I was really proud of those two things, when I cooked. And now, after endless numbers of common meals, when you're cooking with people who are really good cooks, and I really don't, I'm still stressed out when it's my turn to lead a common meal, but I don't really think too much about serving a meal for 35 people. It's a big deal. That's a huge skill set.
After 20 years, man, it doesn't faze me to think that I got to make something for 40 people. Okay. It's no big deal now.
Yeah. When somebody says, well, we're going to have 8 people. Ha! That's a piece of cake, 8 people. My goodness, when we serve 40, that's no problem at all. No problem.
And we've been doing that for almost 20 years, and that's fabulous. You come home, it's not your night to cook, and dinner is served, right? All you have to do is show up for a cook team now and again, and you get to do this. That's pretty fabulous.
For me, it's been very entertaining watching the young kids grow up.
Baby quilts. So when a baby is born at Hearthstone or a child is adopted, then the group of artists come together and make a handmade quilt for the baby that contains fabric and colors selected by the family. Sometimes the fabric is even made by the artists themselves. And then the quilt also contains pieces of the quilts from all the babies that were born before. So the most recent quilt had pieces in it from 20 babies that had been born here.
Denver used to have these very big snowstorms. We don't have them as much anymore. But it would snow 3 feet and the entire city would shut down. And we would come in here into the common house and bake cookies, and then we would go out and build snow forts, and the kids would have tea in the snow fort. Everybody had the day off unexpectedly, so it was always just this fun little gift. And I always reflected when that happened that, oh gee, if I was living in a different environment, I might not be able to just have such a kind of spontaneous get together, and that was fun.
We had an elderly gentleman, some of us remember Aaron, and he was a retired physics prof out of CU.
He would put together the history of natural philosophy classes and invite the co-housing members to sit in the fireplace room. And his recounting of
Galileo
and Copernicus, he treated them like his best friends, like he knew them, like he was so familiar with them. He was telling a story about his cousin, Galileo. He was a mensch, a marvelous man. He had problems with his kidneys. It was time for Aaron to spend his final days, and his wife, Patty, brought him home. Aaron died in his bed, in his unit, and Patty said, "Let's all gather together."
And we called it holding vigil, so most of Hearthstone was there holding vigil for a number of hours.
What a sacred moment. What a sacred moment. So that, for me, is the most significant celebration that we could have had.
Growing up here, I think it's really changed how I interact with friends. It's made it more casual, and I realize like I hang out with them, like I don't schedule things as well.
It's been very different, to grow up and become a teenager in co-housing as opposed to, my friends who haven't lived in co-housing or barely even know what co-housing is. I think a lot better at talking to adults just because I've, grown up around adults that I know very well through, common meals and all the times I see them around the community. We used to play town a lot. So we would be in the kids' room and we'd set up different areas in the town. We'd have, a hotel and a bank. And we would just play this like after every common meal. At the kids' camp, we played a lot of town. As I grew older, I also got to participate more in the community. I go to all of the general meetings that I can. I help on a lot of the work days. I tend to know more about what's happening just because I go to the general meetings and I read the emails. But there have definitely been problems where the teenagers don't feel included in things. I mean, I definitely cannot speak for all of the teenagers. But I know there is a bit of a kind of emotional divide between the teenagers and the adults because the teenagers think the adults aren't listening. The adults think the teenagers are being irrational or doing stupid things or not making the good decisions. So I think the kids kind of want to be taken more seriously. It happens some of the time, but not all of the time.
It's 20 years later, and we're still pretty much making it up as we go along, and there have been and will continue to be conflicts.
It's something that happens in life, and it's not an exception here in Hearthstone, and it can be personally challenging, and sometimes it can be community-wide challenging.
It forces us to take time, because we have that commitment and that intention, to really hear where someone's coming from and generate an appreciation for things that aren't identical to the way that you either, what your values are, what your beliefs are, or what your actions are.
I'm fairly certain that one of the things that will come out of the 20-year celebration is a revisiting of our values, and I would be very surprised if values around diversity, inclusion, issues of race and racism did not make it into the new and improved values. I think it's much more salient in the culture now, and it's much more important to the members in general and to the new members especially. So I think that's very likely.
I trust that as a community, the kinds of things that have worked for us of getting to know each other and increasing our trust with each other can also happen and be successful in the larger community.
Cohousing tends to be new construction or urban infill like we have here. That is more expensive than other kinds of construction and housing. And the reason that that's a problem for us is because we would like to have diversity of various kinds in our community.
The same way we've been intentional about community, we need to be very intentional about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need to have it at the forefront of our mind. We need to integrate it into our planning. We need to think about it regularly when we're doing activities, when we're selling homes, when we're planning events.
When you have 33 households, there's a spectrum of thought on pretty much any subject that you can bring up, right? There's just going to have to be compromise for every person, and it's a challenge, and it's a worthy practice.
And I do think that it is one of the biggest challenges, but at the same time, it's one of the biggest rewards if you can recognize that relationship and the importance of preserving that and work through it together. I think as a community, we've grown a lot in that area. I would say that just like any, community, we probably still have a lot of work to do. But it's something that can be very rewarding if you recognize it, I guess.
I will know that community is always going to be here for me. And I mean that on a monolithic level, but I also mean it on a daily level, that if I need to reach out to somebody, I just have to do it. And you walk up to the mailroom or you walk along the pathway, the sidewalk, and there's people to talk to. And that changes me in who I am over time.
One of the things that I didn't even realize I was struggling with was my inability to ask for help, and always trying to do things in situations that would isolate me. So taking on a project that I would fail to ask for help would make it more difficult, but I would rationalize it by saying, well, I really don't want to bother with having to teach somebody else how to do this. I'll do it myself. In doing that, I was depriving the other individuals the pleasure of helping, thwarting their generosity. And my trying to isolate was not contributing to the building of community, in fact, was working against it. And so it's been a struggle to ask for help. But when I do, and when I see everyone coming together to do something after I have asked for that help, it really feels great.
Really, it's a joy to be here and know your neighbors. And especially as I get older and my arthritic hands, if I can't get a jar open, although I'm pretty good at learning the tricks, I know where I can go to get it open. And it's nice to be able to do things for people and to have people help you out too.
I really like how close I am to friends here. Like how I can just walk over to a friend's house and say, hey, do you want to do something today? I think I've just really made lifelong friendships here. It's like Noah and I, we always like talk about like our future, like we're gonna move in together and possibly go to CU together. And so this will be cool to look back at if we actually do it. But I think just no matter like what happens, these are like my friends that'll stay with me forever.
I know the names of every single person who lives here, and I know some good stories about every single person in this community. And I've shared some important moments with every single person in this community. That's extraordinary.
When I first moved in, I was so kind of delirious seeing all these people that I had known for 3 years and saw every 2 weeks. And suddenly they're all around me, and they live right next door, right across from me. And I just was laughing about that so much, how crazy that was. I could just tell by the people that we saw the first 3 or 4 meetings. I just knew it was my place.